At Mel's Diner, where the Formica booths cracked under years of small-town wear and tear, the woman behind the counter kept her sleeves long, even in the heat of July. Every day, Sarah Miller poured coffee into chipped mugs, refilled sugar containers, and endured the cruel, sideways glances of customers who only saw the scars on her hands. They whispered, laughed, left tips on the floor like insults, convinced she was some tragic mess they could dismiss with a joke or a shrug. But today, everything was about to change. It started with a shove. A loud construction worker, swaggering with entitlement, nudged her hard as she tried to pass. Her arm jerked, the sleeve slid up, and that's when the quiet man in the corner booth froze mid-sip. His coffee had long since gone cold, but his hands were still wrapped around the cup like it was grounding him. What he saw on her arm stopped time. A tattoo. Not just any ink, but a distinct military tattoo. One that marked a place, a unit, a year burned into his memory like a brand. 3rd Infantry Division, Ramadi, 2006. Michael Kelly had been sitting in that booth for 2 hours. Not because the eggs were good, they weren't. And not because he was particularly fond of lukewarm coffee. No, Michael had stayed because he saw something familiar in the way Sarah moved. There was a precision to her steps, a quiet alertness in the way she scanned the room every few minutes. She never fully turned her left side toward anyone. And despite the sweltering summer heat, she stayed wrapped up, like the fabric was her armor. 18 years he'd been searching, hospitals, VA reunions, online forums, even message boards full of grainy photos and rumors. And now, she was right in front of him. But how could it be her? The last time he saw that face, it had been covered in soot and blood, framed by fire in the darkness of a burning Humvee. He remembered the IED blast, the way it tossed their vehicle like a toy, flipped it, trapped them in a metal coffin already filling with smoke. He remembered screaming, the sound of bullets pinging off twisted steel. And then her. Her hands had reached through the flames, steady, unshaken, pulling him out when the door jammed and his leg wouldn't move. She'd gone back into that fire, for Thompson, for Rodriguez, because that's who she was. She didn't run. She shielded him with her own body when the second explosion went off, and then she vanished. They'd told him she didn't make it, that the burns were too severe, that she'd died somewhere between Ramadi and Germany. But now here she was, pouring coffee in a roadside diner, acting like she'd never saved anyone. The bell over the door clanged as Chad Morrison and his crew swaggered in, bringing with them the kind of toxic confidence that shifted the air like a storm rolling in. Chad was all loud laughs and flexed biceps, muscles sculpted in a gym, not earned on a job site. He surveyed the room like a lion eyeing prey and landed on Sarah. She walked over with her notepad, calm and composed. "Morning, gentlemen. What can I get started for you today?" But Chad leaned back in his seat with a sneer that everyone knew too well. The smirk he wore right before turning mean. "Damn, sweetheart," he said loud enough for half the diner to hear. "You know it's July, right? What's with the winter wardrobe? Hiding something under there? Burn marks? Meth scars?" His crew chuckled. The sound was hollow, rehearsed like hyenas laughing on cue. Other patrons buried their faces in newspapers and coffee cups, pretending not to hear. The cowardice of silence. Sarah didn't flinch. She stood tall, her voice steady. But Michael noticed the tightness in her shoulders, the way her left hand stayed behind the order pad like it was shielding something precious. The sun cut across the room, casting sharp lines between booths and shadows, between what was normal and what was not. Chad wasn't done. "Maybe you spilled hot grease on yourself, or maybe you're one of those weirdos who cuts herself for attention. That it?" One of his crew laughed again, but with less confidence now. Even they were starting to feel it, that shift in the air, that sense that something was about to break. At table 3, an elderly man shifted in his seat. His hand hovered near his cane like he was ready to stand, but his wife's quiet whisper held him back. "Don't make trouble, Harold." Still, the diner buzzed with that uncomfortable stillness, that tension that builds when everyone knows something is wrong. But no one wants to be the one to say it. Even the cook had stopped working. Through the order window, his eyes were locked on the scene unfolding. Sarah took the men's orders without blinking. She didn't react, didn't give Chad what he wanted, so he escalated. He pulled out 2 crumpled dollar bills and flicked them to the floor. "There's your tip," he said with mock sweetness. "Maybe save up for some scar cream, though I doubt they make anything strong enough for that." The bills drifted to the linoleum like fallen leaves. For a moment, the diner was silent. Sarah bent down slowly to pick them up, her hands measured, graceful even now. As she stood, Chad reached out suddenly and shoved her shoulder again. Hard. It happened fast. Her shirt pulled loose. Her sleeve rode up. The room froze. And there it was. The tattoo. The one Michael knew by heart. Ramadi, 2006. The same unit, the same year. The one burned into his memory, just like the scars were burned into her skin. A college student at the counter whispered, "That's a military tattoo," loud enough for everyone to hear. Suddenly, people were seeing her differently. Not a scarred woman in long sleeves, but something else entirely. Michael stood from his booth, his chair scraping against the floor as he reached into his jacket pocket. His hand closed around a photo, faded, folded from too many years of being taken out and looked at. The moment was here, the one he never thought would come. He walked toward her slowly, deliberately, like every step could shatter a dream. "Third Infantry," he said, his voice barely more than a breath. Sarah turned to him, her eyes wide, confused, wounded. Her hand moved to cover her arm, but then stopped, and Michael saw the truth on her face. "Oh my God," he whispered, tears threatening to surface. "Sergeant Miller. Sarah Miller." He stopped just short of her, close enough to see the jagged lines of pain in her expression. Close enough to confirm what he already knew in his heart. "You pulled me out," he said, emotion cracking his voice. "That night in Ramadi. You saved me." She stared at him, stunned. They told me you died, in Germany, that you didn't make it." Michael shook his head. "I've been looking for you for 18 years. Every hospital, every VA clinic. I thought I'd imagine you. A ghost, but you're real." Sarah's hand trembled as the tray she'd been holding dropped. It clattered to the floor, coffee splashing across the diner. And for the first time, her mask cracked. "I thought I failed you," she whispered. "All these years, I thought I failed to save you." The laughter had stopped. The smirks faded. Even Chad Morrison, who moments earlier had been puffed up with pride, now looked small, like a schoolyard bully caught lying by a teacher who used to be a Marine. Sarah's eyes locked with Michael's. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The cracked tile, the smell of grease, the people pretending to drink coffee while watching everything unfold. All of it dissolved into the weight of 18 years carried in silence. "You were real," she said again, her voice shaking now. "I didn't imagine you screaming. The fire, the second blast." Michael nodded slowly, voice thick. "You pulled me through it. You went back into that Humvee. You dragged us out one by one. I was unconscious after that. I woke up in a hospital bed weeks later. They told me the woman who saved us died in the fire, that your body wasn't found." Sarah swallowed hard. "My unit left without me," she said. "Burns were bad, spine fractured. I spent 7 months in a German military hospital. By the time I woke up enough to speak, my paperwork had been rerouted, lost in some kind of red tape storm." She shook her head, bitter. "They declared me dead. And after that, well, there's no protocol for a ghost." Michael blinked. "But why disappear? Why here?" She looked around the diner like she was seeing it for the first time. "I didn't want to be a headline," she said. "I didn't want pity or interviews or the wounded warrior treatment. I just wanted silence. A place where no one looked too closely, where I could blend in, be invisible." He nodded, understanding, but his heart ached. "Sarah," he said, his voice quiet, "you were the bravest soldier I ever saw. You didn't just survive, you saved 3 lives that night." Across the diner, the mood had shifted. The elderly man with the cane was standing now, slow but sure. He gave a nod, low, respectful. A young waitress near the register wiped a tear from her cheek. Even Chad's crew looked uncomfortable. One of them stood, reached for his wallet, and left a $20 tip beside the spilled coffee. But Chad, he tried to recover. Tattoos and war stories don't make you a hero, he sneered, louder than necessary. For all we know, you're just crazy. Made the whole thing up. Sarah didn't look at him. She didn't have to, because Michael stepped forward. He pulled the photo from his pocket, the one he'd carried across oceans and decades. He held it up for everyone to see. It was grainy, faded, but clear enough to make out. A woman in full combat gear, face streaked with ash and blood, gripping the arm of a wounded soldier, dragging him through fire, her eyes full of terror and purpose. Sarah. The cook stared through the window. Holy hell! A young guy in the corner whispered, "That's her." Chad stared at the photo, jaw tight. But he had nothing left. The woman he mocked was the reason 3 American soldiers got to come home. The woman he laughed at had a spine forged in war and fire, stronger than anything he'd ever known. Michael turned back to Sarah. I came here today because someone tipped me off. A guy from a VA support group told me about a quiet waitress in rural Nevada who moved like a soldier. Said she never raised her voice. But when the place was robbed last month, she handled it before the cops even got there. Sarah gave a wry smile. Old habits. He stepped closer. Come back. The unit, what's left of it, we still gather. Every year. We keep the memory of Ramadi alive. And we remember you. She looked at the floor. I'm not that person anymore. Michael reached out, gently touching her shoulder. You still are. Maybe more than ever. Another pause, then Sarah nodded. Just once, but that was enough. Then, something unexpected. The door chimed again. A second man entered, tall, quiet, dressed in civilian clothes but moving like someone who used to command something dangerous. He carried no visible weapon, but everything about him said discipline, precision, and strength. He walked straight to Sarah. Sergeant Sarah Miller? He asked, voice calm. She stiffened. Yes? He pulled a badge from his pocket, but not law enforcement. Naval Special Warfare Command. Michael's jaw dropped. You're Navy? He whispered. The man shook his head. No, but she will be. Sarah blinked. What? You were flagged, Sarah. Months ago. Your name came up during a cross-check of classified field records and recovery cases. Your actions in Ramadi, they were never erased, just buried, and someone found them. He set a sealed envelope on the counter. Official reinstatement. Honorable discharge corrected. Commendations approved. But more than that, he slid another folder beside it. You've been invited to train with us, to consult, lead survival scenarios, teach what others can't. You're not forgotten. You're just overdue. Sarah stared at the envelope, silent. Then she looked up. Why now? The man gave a small smile. Because we still need legends, and the ones who disappear are usually the ones worth finding. Michael exhaled, overwhelmed. The diner stood still, holding its breath. And Sarah? She straightened. For the first time in years, she didn't look like someone trying to disappear. She looked like a soldier, like someone who had been broken, but never defeated. The diner was still, the kind of silence that wraps around the bones. Outside, the Nevada sun beat down on cracked pavement. But inside, something had changed, like a switch had been flipped. Sarah stared at the folder. Her fingers hovered above it. Consult? She repeated, voice almost a whisper. Why me? The naval officer didn't flinch. Because you already did the impossible without the rank, the gear, or the support. Because you led when others froze. You held the line when the mission fell apart. Michael leaned in. Sarah, you don't have to hide anymore. But she didn't move. She looked at her hands, scarred, burned, calloused. Hands that had pulled men from fire. Hands that had served coffee to drunks and truckers for years without trembling once. Then finally she opened the folder. Inside a formal letter of recognition, a photo of the ceremony they'd planned in her honor. A Navy SEAL trident patch sewn onto a black field, and a single handwritten note. Some names are carved in stone. Yours was carved into us. Her breath caught, and for the first time since Ramadi, her eyes filled with tears. The quiet waitress, the ghost who lived in a wheelchair behind a diner counter, suddenly stood taller. Not because her legs worked better, but because something far deeper had straightened inside her. But then, a movement near the back door. Chad. He'd slipped away during the conversation, and now he reappeared, with something in his hand. A phone. Recording. He smirked. Well, this ought to go viral. Little war story from the crazy lady and her friends. Hero turns out to be a waitress with PTSD and a fake badge. Michael took a step forward, voice calm but dangerous. Turn that off, now. Chad didn't listen. You think people are going to buy this? Please, she's just playing soldier. Always was. You got duped. Sarah didn't move, didn't flinch, but her voice cut like a knife. If you post that, you won't be the one people laugh at. Chad scoffed. What, you gonna threaten me? No. She looked him in the eye. I'm going to let the truth handle you. The moment you post that clip, every vet who's ever seen war will recognize what I've lived through. Every woman who served will know that face. That limp, those scars. And you'll be remembered not for what you exposed, but for what you failed to recognize. Chad paused. For the first time, his mouth stayed shut. Then he put the phone down quietly and left. The bell over the diner door jingled. Sarah exhaled. Michael smiled, half pride, half relief. The officer stepped forward. If you accept, training begins in 60 days. You'd work with real teams, people who know how to listen, who know what you are. And if I say no, she asked, then you stay here. No questions, no cameras, but you'll never be forgotten again. She looked at Michael, then back at the badge, then at the cook, who nodded like he'd just watched his sister step into history. And she spoke. Okay, but only if I get to tell my story, my way. The officer smiled. That's the only way it works. Then he saluted her, sharp, clean, military precision. And Sarah? She didn't hesitate. She returned it. Tutor 3 months later, Virginia Beach Naval Base. A classroom full of SEAL candidates sat silently. The projector screen showed a grainy photo, a woman dragging soldiers from a burning Humvee. No one made a sound. Then the door opened, and in rolled a wheelchair. Sarah Miller wore no uniform, just a black shirt, sleeves rolled, scars visible. Her voice when she spoke was low, but commanding. I'm not here to impress you, she began. I'm here to teach you what happens when the mission falls apart. When your gear's gone, your comms are dead, when no one's coming, and you have to decide whether you live scared or die trying. One recruit raised his hand. Ma'am, is it true you pulled 3 men from a blast with a fractured spine? Sarah smirked. No. They blinked. She rolled forward. It was 4. The room erupted into quiet respect. Back in Nevada, a new photo hung behind the counter. Sarah in uniform. Beside her old unit. Beside Michael. Above it, a plaque. She served. She disappeared. She returned. Not because she had to, but because she was never finished. And beneath it, in sharp black ink, Sergeant Sarah Miller, the ghost who returned.